Howdy, and welcome to the first crypto webinar. We will be decrypting crypto. I'm Lindsey Schutters, a crypto journalist at Business Maverick for Daily Maverick, but I'm just a vessel today. I'm joined by Dikesto Mashigo from the FSCA and Christo De Wet, country manager at Luno. But you already knew that because you clicked on a link and you registered and you still showed up to see us. Guys, how are you doing? And happy Bitcoin Pizza Day, where we just kind of celebrate the humble beginnings of this whole revolution, where one man paid 10,000 Bitcoin for pizzas, which would be probably valued at like 20 or 220 billion Rand today. How you guys doing?
Good, thanks, Lindsey. It's good to be here. Fascinating that somebody bought pizza for that much. Good to be here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Lindsey. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Just to get the ball rolling, right? We're going to keep it light. This is just helping people understand how to interact with cryptocurrencies and start getting some utility out of it, starting to invest, opening up their first wallets. But for South Africans curious about entering this world, what are the fundamental first steps they should consider before making any decisions? I'm going to go to you first, Dikesto.
Thanks, Lindy. I think, for us, and when I say us, I mean the regulator. Part of what we also do in our consumer education space is educating people about innovation and products that are coming onto the market, etc. But just basic level sort of understanding. So I think critical and key for new investors, novice investors coming into this space, particularly understanding what it is that you're buying or investing in, and whether or not that you're buying or investing in actually addresses your needs. So that's important. I think there's always been a sense that, and you see it even in the traditional finance space, people going into products for speculative purposes, etc., etc. So it's also important to be clear, on what the purpose is and what the motive is. Speculation could be risky for certain people, and it might not be risky for certain types of clients, etc., etc. So it's very important that people really get to understand what it is that they're buying into, what they've investing in, understand what the risks are in what they are buying into and investing into. And I think similarly from an FSCA point of view, part of what we do is ensure that the entities that we supervise and authorize also have an obligation. So we place an obligation on them to disclose certain things to clients, risks, etc., benefits, etc. Clients have the right to know that, and they have to have access to that type of information, and many of the institutions do provide it. So it's important that they do that. And thirdly, it's important to understand the party or the platform or the venue or the provider that you're dealing with, whether they're licensed or not. And that's simple. You come through us, you check on our website, pop us an email, and we can confirm. So I think those are the three most important things. And I'm sure Christo has quite a few on his end, but for us, that's really it.
Yeah, Christo, just going to you. There's obviously a lot of clamor right now in the market. Bitcoin hit an all-time high yesterday, $110,000, which is almost like 200. It's a lot of money. Everyone's trying to get in. There's a lot of greed out there right now. Where do you stand on just the decisions people need to make and just how they need to inform themselves before taking on these investments?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsey. I think Dikesto touched on the gist of it. I think when it comes to any kind of investment, whether it's crypto or not, is understanding and having a very clear idea of what your financial goals are, both short-term and long-term, and then making sure that you have a very good understanding of what your risk tolerance is, right? So we know that crypto is a higher risk asset class. There is a lot of volatility. So having a very fundamental understanding of that. And then I would say go into getting to know cryptocurrencies. What are the different kinds of cryptocurrencies? Now, I mean, when anybody is new to crypto, it might seem very overwhelming. As it stands at the moment, there's more than 20,000 cryptocurrencies in existence. But then if we look at the total global market cap of those, there's only a handful of those that are really quite significant. And I would say that that might be a very good entry point, is getting to understand those cryptocurrencies that have a bigger market cap, learn about Bitcoin, learn about Ethereum, understand the history behind it, understand the fundamentals. And then I think the most important point, which Dikesto touched on, is then once you are ready to make that leap and invest into cryptocurrency, do so with a licensed platform that fall under the purview of the South African regulatory space. And I think those are some of the critical first steps that any new investor into crypto should consider.
No, definitely. So, like when people are opening up their wallets, they're going on to, most of the time, they're going on to exchanges at the first time. So what does that ownership mean when they are going through centralized platforms like an exchange? Like, for instance, how does holding crypto via an exchange differ from holding crypto like in a personal wallet?
So I'll take that one. I think when you look at cryptocurrency, you can hold it in one of two ways. And the one is through a centralized exchange, such as Luno, or the other one, which you mentioned, is through a private wallet, right? So, and that is where the wallet is in your ownership, in your custody. I think the two big differing points is if an investor decides to hold their cryptocurrency through a centralized exchange, that crypto is custodied and protected by that centralized exchange. So for instance, if you buy a certain amount or a percentage of Bitcoin or Ethereum and you keep it with a centralized exchange, that centralized exchange custodies that crypto and keeps it in safekeeping. Now, there are various things that an investor needs to check out for. Does the centralized exchange publish a proof of reserve? In other words, do they actually have the amount of cryptocurrency that they state they have? Are they actually proving that all of their customers' cryptocurrencies are in safekeeping? And I think that's one of the key points that customers or investors need to look out for. On the other side, if an investor decides to self-custody, they keep it on a what we call a cold wallet. It means that that wallet is a piece of hardware. It can resemble something that looks similar to a thumb drive, and that cryptocurrency is then transferred onto that cold wallet. It is the responsibility then of the investor to keep that cold wallet in safekeeping, right? And there are obviously risks involved with that, because if the customer or the investor forgets their password or misplaces their cold wallet, that crypto is forever lost, right? So I think those are the two big differentiating points.
Just going to you, Dikesto, how do you keep these licensed exchanges and these financial products? I mean, there's like plenty of them. There's Valor, there's Binance, there's Luno. How do you keep them honest? How do you keep people's money safe? And how do you know that, or at least how do customers know that they are actually buying crypto with that money and not doing some dodgy dealings?
Hundreds. Thanks, Lindsey. And I think Christo touched a little bit on it. So we grant licenses to these institutions, and when we grant them licenses, there's certain things that they need to comply with, both at market entry stage, at licensing stage. So they need to be able to demonstrate to us, listen, we are holding clients' assets as an example. We are making sure that these clients' assets are safe and protected at all times. We can confirm that clients have ready access to these client assets of theirs. We also can confirm, as an example, that we don't do things that clients don't mandate us to do with those assets. So we can't lend them out, as an example, or use them for any other purpose. And we can confirm that we keep them separate from our own assets. So those are some of the high level things we make sure that they have. And when they say that that's not something that just gets said. It's got to be proven through systems, through frameworks, through documents that they put in place, and entities like Luno that have been in this space for a long time. I mean, Christo can speak to it, and we've had many conversations. That is exactly the process that we follow to make sure that client assets are protected, to make sure that the providers act in a way that is expected of them in terms of our requirements. So our role, as you would know, is that of a contract regulator. So we want providers to behave in a certain way, in a way that doesn't, prejudice their clients or, is harmful to their clients in any way. Conflict of interest, things like that. When stuff happens, they need to tell us, oh, we are conflicted when it comes to this and this and how we deal with clients, but we disclose that upfront, and this is how we are managing it, and this is how we disclose to clients. So it's a whole host of things that we try and ensure that the providers have in place before we grant them that license. Once we've granted them the license, the process doesn't end there. There is a second process that kicks in, supervision process that kicks in. They need to submit certain things. They would need to confirm to the authority and say to us, listen, we've got an independent auditor's report that shows we are holding X amount of client assets, and it's kept here and it's kept safe. We haven't done anything with it other than keep it for our clients. It is in their names, etc., etc. So we do all of it. To try and protect the clients, but not only the clients, but also the providers as well. Thanks, Lindsey. But those are some of the high-level things. I mean, we once you have a license, it comes with huge responsibilities, from the people behind those businesses that we approve and vet, to systems and processes and controls that need to be put in place to make sure that they support the business that they do. If, for instance,
but how does the authority define ownership when it's going through an exchange? Like, who owns those assets? How is it defined in those laws?
Well, and I think Christo can also chip in, but I think if a person purchases, if I purchase a financial product, it can be a share, it can be a crypto asset, it can be anything. My ownership in that asset is represented somehow, and I think in this space, you can look at tokens that I've bought, the value of those tokens, and that proportionately is what I'm holding in that particular asset. And I think that's how they go about, the providers go about doing that. So it's almost fractionalized. If you like, you hold a fraction, it can be confirmed with you at any given point. If you say, listen, I just need to check my balances, I need to see how my investments have grown or shrunk, entities like Luno are able to quickly give you that information. Christo?
No, absolutely. I think one of the things that's super important to consider here is, do you have immediate access to that asset, right? So if you hold a certain amount of cryptocurrencies, and I think it's important for new time investors to understand that you don't have to hold an entire Bitcoin. You don't have to purchase entire Bitcoin. You can purchase a fraction of it, right? Or invest in a fraction of it. You have immediate access to that. So meaning, even though Luno or the centralized exchange custodies it and keeps it in safekeeping, you have an immediate access to that via to further trade it, to withdraw it, to convert it back to rand, to convert it into other currencies. And I think that's very important. And one of the points that Dikesto also touched on is the commingling of funds. So our exchange is able to prove and validate that they have their customers' cryptocurrencies in one area and then their corporate funds in another, and that those two don't get muddied or mingle together, that all of the funds used for corporate expenditure is completely separate from that one-to-one relationship that is needed to showcase that all of our customers' cryptocurrencies are in the vault or in the custody where we say it is, and then that's not used for other purposes. And that then, I think, speaks directly to that level of ownership that investors in cryptocurrency have through centralized exchanges. And that's a very important point to look out for. And that's usually proven through an audited or a report from an auditor called a proof of reserve. And I think for new time investors, always make sure that you look out for that on your centralized exchange website, whether or not that exchange goes through the effort to showcase a proof of reserve.
Here's a nice one from George. If I've never bought crypto before, what's the safest and smartest first steps to take in South Africa right now? Well, George, there are a lot of licensed products out there. One of them is Binance, one of them is Luno, one of them is Vela. But I'm going to hand it to Christo just to talk through the on-ramping process.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Lindsey. I think, George, very carefully select your centralized exchange where you want to go through. You can verify that on the FSCA's website as well to make sure that, this is a cryptocurrency exchange platform that is licensed. And then you would go through the process of setting up an account. So that would be to download the app on your smartphone, or you can access it through a desktop computer or a laptop or through a website. Sign up for an account, go through the KYC, the know your customer details. That is submitting your first name, your last name, your address, your proof of ID, making sure that you declare, what is your intention of purchasing or investing in cryptocurrency. And once that onboarding process has been done, then it is as simple as then allocating or deciding in which cryptocurrency you want to invest in, loading South African Rand onto that platform, and that can be via an EFT. You can use your debit card to do so, to get money onto the platform. And then once your South African Rand is on the platform, you can very easily then purchase or invest in the cryptocurrency of your choice, which is listed on the platform. And as I mentioned, it's not necessary to think, oh shucks, Bitcoin reached $110,000 or $111,000 yesterday. I now have to, that's the amount needed to get in. You can do fractions of that, and you can buy, a percentage of that cryptocurrency to get into it. And always, I think the risk is only invest with what you are comfortable with. That's a very critical point that you need to take into your decision making.
That's super important. There's one for you, Dikesto. Penny is asking, did AfriCrypt go through the Financial Conduct Authority? If so, how did they manage to steal more than 300 million of investors' money? That's a great story that my colleague Yashil was doing some deep reporting on. Like, how do these scammers still kind of get through to get so? I think we've lost him. Christo, you obviously familiar with all of that. Dikesto's back.
Yes. I got cut off there for a bit. Apologies for that.
No worries.
Yeah.
Did you get the question about AfriCrypt and how these scammers still get through? If there are so many hurdles in place that they need to clear before they can start accepting South African money, how did the guys like AfriCrypt go through all of that and then still make off with over 300 million of investors' money?
Sorry, I got the gist of it. I think it's a bit, the bandwidth is a bit sketchy. I think from our side, and please let me know if I'm addressing it 100% because I missed most of it. A big part of what we do as well on the FSCA side is enforcement and investigation. So when we from time to time receive either complaints or tip-offs, etc., on entities that are purporting to be, legitimate providers, etc., there are processes internally on our side to try and go into those entities, investigate them. We actually have quite a few that we are looking at this point in time. But the whole purpose of it is really to keep the bad participants out. And that's why we, the 280 odd cusps that we've licensed to date, there have been face-to-face engagements with them. It's not just paper work that we do and desktop work that we do. And, so we fully engage these guys, test them out, ask them, put them through a really, really, really rigorous process through difficult curveballs. Make sure that, clients are protected at all times. So that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. We try and eliminate the participants that struggle to meet some of our requirements. We handhold them until we get to a point where either they they are able to jump on this side, or they need to go back and readdress some of the material things that we point out with them. But I think we are very cautious and careful when we consider applications, primarily for that reason, and just to make sure that whoever we let into the system is a sound, stable player that adheres to our conduct rules.
All righty. Marie, I see you. The 19th of June, there's another webinar like this where we talk about the utility. I have the guys from Bitcoin Ikasi. It's a township movement out in Mossel Bay where all the vendors there and on the beach, they all dealing in crypto. So you can pay via like Luno Pay, Valor Pay, like all those kinds of things. Pick and Pay does accept crypto payments as well through the QR code system. So when you get a wallet and you get a payment system, you can go through that. But we will be talking about those utilities on the next webinar, which will be on the 19th. But just coming to more like kind of Christo's realm of interest. There's a question about why do the exchanges limit the amount that can be transferred in a single transaction, and why South African banks are so hesitant to allow transfers to crypto providers. This is actually a question I asked you in real life when I interviewed you a couple of weeks back. Just give some more clarity around like the breaks that need to be put in place just to like guide, or at least the guardrails to guide newer investors.
Sure. So I think the limits that are imposed in terms of the amount of money that can be transferred to an exchange or out, that's also governed by regulation. There are certain checks in place that needs to adhere, so that we put necessary measures in place for anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing measures in place. So I think that's very critical. And then there's also safeguards, right? So we want to protect customers against making wrongful transactions in terms of the amount of money that they can transfer. In terms of the banks, I think this is a concern that we as the crypto industry have, that we've spoken with some of the regulators as well to say that cryptocurrency is now in this regulated space, but there's still some hesitance from some banks to work with the crypto industry. But I think when we look at the accessibility of transferring funds, it's very important to also understand, what payment methods or transfer methods are available and what measures are in place. And I know that, for instance, Capitec recently introduced Capitec Pay, and it is possible to use Capitec Pay to transfer funds over to Luno, which is a centralized exchange. So just be clear on which payment methods are available, investment methods are available. But I think also, as Dikesto mentioned previously, it was one thing to get the cryptocurrency industry regulated and start issuing those licenses. It's now when it's in that supervision phase where further development is necessary. And that is how the industry will also mature. And I think how the broader traditional finance space will adopt to cryptocurrency as well. And I think that there would be a much better interaction between the traditional finance sector and the cryptocurrency sector.
Just kicking to you, Dikesto. This is also like for a little bit of my own personal research. What is the outlook from the FSCA towards these kinds of investments? How are they being seen, treated because it's now not institutions that are investing, it's like actual people that are moving money around in various ways of exchanges. What are some of the regulations around that? And then how close are we to exposure to other kinds of crypto derivatives like the ETFs and those kinds of vehicles?
Yeah. Good question, I think. So I think while we have made significant inroads, as Christo's pointed out, into regularizing this sector, I think we've also been cautious to taper off the process and stagger things in as we go. I think so. The first phase was really to just go through this licensing process, interview participants, understand what it is that they're, what it is that they're doing, products and services that they offer to clients, and various other things, risks, etc., associated with what they do. So get them within our remit. The next phase obviously will entail looking at things that we and I think you touched on it. Investments in inclusion of crypto assets as an example into CIS funds or collective investment schemes funds, or in the pension fund space, etc. So I think that is work that is currently being looked at, and I think it's something that's going to come further down the line. But I think we wanted to bring in guys, look at the contact aspects of the guys that we are bringing in, and then start bringing in certain things. Payments is one of them. We are in discussions, as an example, with the central bank on the payment side, with some of the payment providers. So there are use cases that I think we've seen quite a bit now. Investment management. We've dealt with investment managers. We've dealt with advisors, tokenization models. We've custodians, etc. So it's all phased out, and I think we eventually want to get to a point where we are able to say, okay, now we are looking at the entire ecosystem, and we are looking at all of these, use cases. Where do we need to go in and refine and enhance certain things, and that's further down the line as well. But we just, on the back of scams and frauds that have been happening, I think the most critical, part of the process was to first get guys in and license them, and start supervising them, and then we look at other things that are necessary. But the work is ongoing. It's ongoing. Sorry.
Yeah, there's a lively discussion happening in the chat at the moment about the AfriCrypt stuff, and that was rightfully pointed out by Tara. That happened before the licensing came into effect. So I don't think it's fair on Dikesto to maybe address those things. But what kind of recourse is there now if there are still scams happening that just happens to slip by? Are you equipped to go and investigate these guys, do chain analysis, and go track these funds down so that investors can get some kind of recourse?
Yeah, no, 100%. So we have, and we've always had a fully fledged an enforcement and investigation division within the FSCA. So their sole mandate is looking at things like this: unregistered business, scams and frauds, etc., etc. So that is their specialty. That's their daily focus. So we are. And I think I indicated earlier on as well. So we've got a couple of cases that we are looking at, or rather the team is looking at. When we do get complaints or tip-offs, etc., etc. So we've got dedicated inboxes and lines that people can use, to share some of those complaints and tip-offs and, behavior that's not wanted in the market, etc. So those can come through to us. We fully investigate those things, and we are equipped. We can take regulatory action, and that ranges from a simple admin penalty. Well, I say simple, but it can be huge. Administrative penalty. We can debar people. We can suspend their licenses. We can withdraw their licenses, and we've done that. So in short, we are equipped to look into some of these scams and frauds, etc.
Yeah. Okay, Christo, here's one for you. TJ wants to know.
I just maybe just want to add to that point before we move on to another question. I think there's a big notion that a lot of scams are purely being driven from a crypto perspective, right? And I think what we must understand is that scams are being driven across the board, across the financial sector space. And I think what the FSCA does very well is they send out press releases on when some of these scams are identified, what is the investigation. So I think, if potential investors and investors want to subscribe to those press releases, please do so. But I think also understanding the licensing framework on which registered crypto businesses are intermediary services or actually financial advisory services, right? And I think a big distinction here is that centralized exchanges are intermediary services, meaning that they would not render financial advice. And I think that's very cautious. So if there's a Facebook page or a Twitter or Instagram page saying that I am a representative from Luno or a financial advisor from any other centralized exchange, it's most likely a scam, right? And I think that level of vigilance and education and awareness is very important when assessing the space. And even though the regulators have these units that investigate and try to combat it, there are so many scammers out there. So that level of vigilance and awareness and education is very important. And making sure that if you are to invest in cryptocurrency or in any other investment, to make sure that you understand the platform that you are using and be sure that you are doing it directly. And the big caution that we always give is if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is, right? So just
Yeah, nah, for
trust
sure.
that level of judgment.
For sure. Talking about things that are too good to be true and like the easy money vibe. TJ wants to know what's the difference between a exchange and something like easy equities. I don't wanna upset the day traders. You take it away, Christo.
So I think a centralized exchange like Luno, we trade purely on crypto, and we give you direct access to that crypto, sell that cryptocurrency. Whereas a platform such as Easy Equities that gives you a representation of that, maybe put into a bundled fund or a basket of cryptocurrencies, right? But centralized crypto exchanges are the ones that deal directly in the cryptocurrency, list the various cryptocurrencies on platform, gives you access to the blockchain, and it's native to cryptocurrencies, whereas the other platforms are a little bit different in that sense.
Can you just talk the chat through how you move your money through, like from you're on-ramping from ZAR, you're going into whatever coins, and then choosing between the different coins, and you're cashing out, if you're cashing out directly to ZAR again, or if you're just staying on the exchange. Just what are the mechanics there?
So once you upload a RAN, which we call fiat, onto the platform, that fiat then enables you to invest in various cryptocurrencies. I saw another question coming through as well. If you only purchase a fraction of the cryptocurrency, does that mean you only get a fraction of the return? And I think the best way to look at it is as soon as you purchase or invest into cryptocurrency, depending on how much you invest to a percentage of that. But that percentage is set in your holdings, and then any growth or loss, depending on what the market does, is related to that percentage that you hold. But then once you have the cryptocurrency, to get back to that, is once you have Rand on the platform and you purchase cryptocurrency or invest into cryptocurrency, you hold that asset until you decide, okay, I want to maybe exchange my Bitcoin for Ethereum, or I want to see that the market is doing really well. I want to cash in on my profits. I decide to then sell my Bitcoin and exchange it back into Rands. That then goes back into your Rand wallet on the platform, and then you have the option to withdraw that. So you can withdraw that then to the bank account, which is linked to your platform or to your account, and it's as easy as that. But what you can also do is you can send and receive cryptocurrencies between different wallets. So if you have X amount of Bitcoin on Luno and you want to send it to a Valor address, then you can do that as well. So you can send that cryptocurrency or receive cryptocurrency in that form.
Yeah, or a Binance address. Yeah, the whole garden route is becoming a crypto haven, like Witsand, Neisner, Sedgefield's also popping off now. Mossel Bay is going, as I said earlier. Like there's just people living outside of fiat and they're just trading in crypto. A lot of them are using like the stable coins because they're just easier to transact with. But on that, one for you, Dikesto, what kind of liabilities do you guys accept for errors and omissions in the authentication process and reserve underwriting as well? And how are you managing to keep up with the current utility in crypto where people are paying for like groceries with that kind of money and just the fluctuations there? What protections are in place to not like have wallet shock when guys are getting to the point of sale? Yeah, it's just a fast moving thing now as these crypto payments start ramping up.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lindsey. I think so. Just maybe going back to something that I pointed out earlier. So, our focus is, and I think the phase actually defines what financial services is. So we've got a list of financial products. So if anyone renders services in relation to any of those products, we would obviously go through this process with them and license them. Errors, I'm not sure if we, you know, and it can happen that, you know, when somebody applies with us, they provide us with certain information. And once we've gone through that process and ticked all the boxes and we are comfortable that they meet the requirements and grant them the license, they go and stray. We call it straying. So they start doing something else that they're not licensed for. One or two things is going to happen. We will receive complaints and we will deal with them and take enforcement action. Or our team, our ongoing supervision team, goes out and inspects these guys and makes sure that everybody that's been granted a license does what they say they are doing, or what they say they have done at licensing stage. So we try, and that's very difficult to control. When you license someone, they can go and do other things. I think what we are strict around is if we grant you a license, it's for a specific thing. You cannot go and start engaging in credit business, as an example, using a face license. And when you do engage with clients, there is an obligation on you as a provider to disclose what it is that you've been licensed for and what you can or cannot do. And I think Christo touched on it earlier as well. We issue different types of licenses, categories of licenses. An advisor cannot go and manage client funds with it. So there is a different license for it. Similarly, an investment manager or an exchange cannot go and, on a discretionary basis, manage client funds without the necessary authorization. So those are the guardrails and controls we put in place. And as I said, so if someone strays and starts doing what they're not supposed to be doing, usually there's complaints coming through, there's tip-offs coming through, or we pick up on it when we do our normal supervision on-site visits, and then we take the necessary action. When it comes to things like payments, etc., I think one of the points I touched on was there is a very important space that we are focusing on now, and there's discussions between us and the central bank and National Payment Systems Department in particular on how we are looking at this particular use case for payments, because it is an important use case. And I think one of the things we wanted to do and we want to achieve is alignment between us, because they own the payment services space, and us from a contact point of view. How do we align and make sure that we have synergies and license these guys properly, and not us licensing and creating downstream challenges for them. So that is ongoing. But every use case that comes before us goes through a stringent process of analysis, and sometimes applications take up to about 6-8 months because it's that intense. We need to unpack certain things. We're not happy with certain things. So when we grant licenses, we are comfortable on the face of it that certain minimum requirements are met. Otherwise, we would keep everybody out if we started straying that line and looking at, so we make sure that the certain basic things are in place. The businesses are able to, conduct the business that they say they want to conduct, and clients are protected at the same time. Also, I think what's also important is we've got an established, unit within the FSCA. It's called the Business Center Unit. Their sole focus is fielding things like inquiries and complaints and tip-offs, etc., and make sure those are dealt with, because that's important. That's an important source of information around practice outside when clients start complaining, and we keep those channels open to make sure that everything that comes through is dealt with. But let me just pause there.
No worries.
But I mean, we every application that comes before us, whether it's a crypto application or it's a non-crypto application, it's subject to the process.
Okay, Jonathan, what references can I use to decide which cryptos are available and what advantage one crypto has over another? Business Maverick, if you go to Daily Maverick website and you navigate to Business Maverick, we have a top 20 crypto ticker at the top of the page there. That is powered by Binance. You can check out that, and then I would just suggest you do your research as much as possible, get to know all these assets, what is driving them. You can subscribe to Crypto Corner. I'm trying to unpack and like that kind of knowledge there as well. But yeah, like I know the exchanges have different ways of deciding which cryptos that they're listing. There's a lot of new coins coming in. Luno just published a whole bunch of them the other day. Christo, can you just speak to people through the altcoin scene?
Sure. Thanks, Lindsey. I think when you mentioned that there's on the Daily Maverick that list of top 20, maybe it's just important to share with the listeners that that's maybe presented on the global market cap. So meaning the amount of value that these cryptocurrencies hold in dollar form. And that's a good starting point. If we look at Bitcoin, which is the original cryptocurrency, it is the biggest one by market cap. It holds almost, between 60 to 70% of all the market cap of cryptocurrencies, and then the rest fill the rest of the space. But pretty much the majority of the market cap is filled by that top 20 or 30, right? I think that's a good starting point. Then understanding the underlying the foundation of that cryptocurrency, right? So Bitcoin being the biggest, being the original one, is always a good entry point or a good starting point for most investors. But if you want to go into the altcoin space, look at the underlying utility, look at what the technological foundation is, look at the past performance, knowing that past performance is not indicative of future growth as well. But these are all good measures. And I think just do a lot of desktop research, right? The best way to learn is, okay, I see that this asset is listed on Luno. It's a strange name. Put it into Google, research about it, understand the foundations of it. What are the structures and the utility that is in place, and what value does it add, right? And that's a very good way to learn. Another way to get into it is to make use of a bundled product. So on Luno as well, we've got the Luno Large Cap Bundle, which is a basket of cryptocurrencies that, we allocate a percentage of it. It almost resembles an ETF, but it's not an ETF. And that basket of cryptocurrencies is a good way to start learning about, what are the dynamics, what are the market drivers that drive that. And Lindsey, I saw in the question as well, there is a question around ETFs and that. So if we look what happened in the US last year, January, crypto ETFs were approved on the stock exchanges in the United States. And that saw significant institutional capital flow into the cryptocurrency industry. In South Africa at the moment, legislation does not allow for crypto ETFs to be listed on the JSE. There's some bigger talks in play at the moment, how the Markets Act need to be reinterpreted to allow for that to happen. But I think once that happens, it is also a good way for investors to invest into cryptocurrency with an investment vehicle that they are familiar and comfortable with. A lot of traditional investors are quite familiar with ETFs. And what we're seeing just by looking at the amount of capital that went into the ETFs in the United States, that's a very familiar and comfortable investment vehicle, and we're seeing huge attraction for that. But these baskets of cryptocurrencies that are listed, it's a good way to get exposure to varied cryptocurrencies, various cryptocurrencies, and also then allows investors to learn more about those cryptocurrencies that are in that basket.
Yeah, and just touching on that, Anita was asking if the crypto assets also then form part of the assets should someone pass away or something like that. Yes, it does. It's all like tax affected kind of asset stuff, so treat it as usual. Like this is a fast evolving market, and we at that point now where it is level with like your cash holdings, maybe you got some gold or all those other things. Just on that, Christo, how does an exchange kind of manage that? Because obviously there's wallet passwords, there's all of those sorts of things. How does that get passed on to the estate?
mean, whenever a family member or a loved one passes away, we understand that it's a very traumatic experience to go through, and there's always a huge amount of administration that goes into that. And we are equipped to deal with that. So if that happens, reach out to our customer support center.
Mm.
There will be requests for the death certificate, and then there's a formal process that happens to make sure that the assets are actually declared. It then becomes part of the estate, and that is then transferred over depending on what the estate
Mm.
looks like, and who are the managers of the estate. But there is a formal process as part of that. It doesn't mean if a person passes away, the cryptocurrency held with Luno just disappears. It does form part of the estate, and then that transfer follows the legal requirements that is stipulated.
Yeah, and obviously that gets a lot more complicated if you have a cold wallet sitting with your crypto around your neck on a USB drive, because then you need wallet access to that. So please build those things into your walls, and just make sure that there's the easy handover of that. On that topic, the Dikesto, in the applications for licenses, is there a stipulation that these exchanges and these products need to be able to issue tax certificates? Just talk us through that process.
Thanks, Lindsey. So there is no explicit, there are no explicit prescriptions. I think we had a catch-all requirement for anybody that we grant a license to. And that is that they comply with all applicable laws. That would include tax laws, anything that that applies NSA. Those providers would need to make sure that they comply with, and that could, by implication, mean ensure that your clients are compliant from a tax point of view. You provide certain information that that would promote tax compliance, etc.
Yeah. Obviously, the FSCA and SARS are two different kind of things. There's a lot of questions coming through about tax implications and those sort of things. So when you are trading across your portfolio and realizing gains from your portfolio, those all do trigger different tax events as well. But not the 19th of June, but the third crypto webinar. We will be having, I think it's Vian Olivier from Mazars. And then we're trying to get hold of someone from SARS just to talk through the tax implications of all that. Yeah, but watch Crypto Corner, the newsletter. I'll be publishing a lot more of that kind of information through there as we now mature as an audience and as a platform at Daily Maverick together into looking at crypto as a true asset that is worthy of investor money. Yeah, we are running towards the end of this, so we're going to start winding down a little bit. So if there's any really pressing questions in the chat, please drop it in there. Christo, just talking about those kinds of trading and off-ramping. It's obviously not, and I've had this conversation with you before. From an outsider, it's in the exchange's best interest to keep customers on board and interacting with your stuff. But when customers are exiting, are there still a lot of guys who are just selling out, outright, and taking their money off of crypto? Or do you see a lot more guys graduating to more advanced kind of trading platforms?
Thanks, Lindsey. I think we're seeing everything, right? So it really depends on what is the investment strategy and the need for crypto, right? So we are seeing investors that they purchase a certain or invest in a certain amount of cryptocurrency, and then they just hold that with us, not really doing anything with it. There could be various reasons why they purchased it. They maybe got in when the market was quite low, and they just leave that there as a long-term investment. But then we also see, professional traders or high-frequency traders that, send cryptocurrency back and forth between the exchanges. There's arbitrage trading that takes place. And I saw a question also in the questions coming through, like what is the amount of time that it takes for these transactions to take place, because the volatility of the crypto market and those transactions typically take place in milliseconds. It's very, very fast, right? So um, there's various use cases that we see, in the crypto industry. There is that notion towards, or the true natives, the early adopters to cryptocurrency. There is that notion around self-custody, that they want to keep their cryptocurrency, off exchange, kind of in cold wallets. But as we discussed, there is a high level of risk involved in that. Whereas with a centralized exchange, it is in safe custody. It is, our security protocols and measures are very tight in that sense. But there's differing use cases. Customers use cryptocurrencies in different ways. The investment strategies are different. And depending on what the market does, obviously, when, typically what we see when crypto or Bitcoin, for instance, reaches all-time highs like it did yesterday, or in the early mornings of today, early morning. We see that's an awakening, that potential investors say, okay, crypto is growing, it's time to get in. Other people also see that as an opportunity. You know what? I bought crypto or Bitcoin when it was at $70,000. This is a good time for me to take that profit, because obviously I need cash. So there are various use cases in that, and we see people utilizing our platform in various different ways.
Okay. One from the traders. Does trading from BTC from Bitcoin to Ethereum, for example, trigger CGT, or is the CGT only triggered when you convert to fiat? So that's a tax event.
Yeah, so that I would leave for the expert at SARS and our tax professionals to answer that, because SARS have different ways of interpreting that. But I do think what is very important, and I think when you have your crypto tax webinar, it will be very interesting, is crypto is taxable. SARS has made that abundantly clear. In 2019 already, they declared that crypto is a taxable event. And any gains and losses are taxable, right? So any gains earned or profit earned can be taxed. There's various ways. It can be income tax, it can be capital gains tax. But that interpretation, right, depends on how SARS sees that transaction. What is the intention behind it? I think the most important thing is crypto is a financial product. It is under the regulatory purview. Crypto is taxable event. So when you file your tax returns every year, be very sure to declare that you hold crypto assets, right? Because it is very important to be truthful on that. And then depending on how you utilize that crypto, what your investments look like, SARS will determine what the tax liability is on that. And if it's income, we know that it forms part of your total income. If it's capital gains, then obviously there are different rules that apply there.
Just staying with you, Christo. Sorry, Dikesto, I will get back to you shortly. But your hands out there. Is the real problem not simply that the investor does not have ownership of the crypto asset, but merely that the debtor merely has a debtor-creditor relationship with the exchange? In other words, the investor merely becomes. Yeah, just talk about that relationship again. I don't think we fully covered what kind of interaction it is.
So when it comes down to it, the investor has ownership of that cryptocurrency, or the amount of crypto that they sell on platform. That is theirs to keep, right? Because they can eventually go and take that off platform. They can put that in cold storage. That crypto remains theirs. As long as there's a one-to-one relationship of that crypto, which I said is in the proof of reserves, that ownership belongs. So that cryptocurrency is mapped to that customer, to that investor. And I think that's very important. As soon that you also always have access to it, and that nothing can happen if anything bad happens to the exchange, that customer will always have access to it. And that level of ownership, I think, comes with reliable exchanges.
And now we kick it to Dikesto. So Bitcoin being legal tender, some countries say it isn't, but then revenue collection seek to get tax gains. Will they allow losses as well? Just talk us through how crypto is seen in terms of like tender and just the thinking around that.
Yeah, I think I also would want to defer that to the SAR, but I mean, it's safe to say at this point, crypto has not been declared legal tender, so it doesn't have legal tender status. No one is obligated to accept it. Only parties that accept it can accept it. So we are, yeah, so that's quite right. I think we, as the FSCA, our main concern and focus is on, just the conduct around the services that are rendered around crypto. And just to make sure that people that are rendering those services act in a certain way, in a certain acceptable way in line with our requirements. But quite right. I mean, there are ongoing discussions around, just that point, the fact that it's not legal tender, etc., etc. I mean, it performs certain functions of legal tender for participants that accept it and merchants that accept it, etc., etc. So yeah, I can't speak beyond that, but I mean, that's where we are.
Are you using crypto yourself, Dikesto? Just in closing, like, what's your experience been on this journey, kind of tracking the rise through your career? Because you've been around, and now there's a sudden shift. What's your overall feeling, and are you using it personally?
I'll skip the second question, but I think I think there is general recognition that the sector is a burgeoning sector. So the crypto asset sector is a growing space. As regulators, and not just us, I think globally, if you look globally, everybody is looking at crypto assets and saying, how do regulators play a meaningful role here? And role many enabling the sectors, helping stimulate the sector, but also de-risking it, because you have climate protection objectives that you need to meet. So I think it's a delicate balancing act, but I think one that we are all up for. It's a challenge, but I think one that global regulators are up for, making sure that we keep the sector safe and good. It is an asset class. I mean, we recognize that we are seeing that, and that's why we are, licensing around it. And there's no going back. I think we just have to keep refining what we have and aligning. And one of the big things for us now is really aligning globally with some of the big, advanced jurisdictions, etc. Make sure that we are seen in the same light as some of these advanced jurisdictions. But yeah,
I'm just jumping to Christo because I'm being hassled here that there's not much time left, and I want him to get a nice closing statement just around like your journey through crypto, seeing crypto mature in South Africa from an asset. What's the projection for you? Where do you see this going?
I think it's been a fascinating journey in South Africa, right? We were one of the first jurisdictions globally to license cryptocurrency, to declare it a financial product. So really, leaps and bounds ahead of many other countries around the world. I think that needs to continue. I think further and broader inclusion in the broader financial space is needed. Like we said, we want to see crypto ETFs being listed on the JSE. We want to see crypto forming part of collective investment schemes. I think that level of maturity and evolution is still needed, and that's how I see it. But I think coming from an asset class that wasn't really seen as an asset class that had huge potential to being where we are today, and just seeing that growth, the industry growing, how traditional financial advisors and advisory firms are getting on board, how the banks are also starting to develop, their own cryptocurrency strategies as well. It's magnificent how we've seen the evolution. And I just see it growing much more. I mean, just to end off there, then, Lindsey, like publications such as the Daily Maverick that has a crypto corner, a newsletter and focus is also just justification for how far the industry has come, and that it's here to stay.
Yeah, thank you guys for joining. Thank you, the viewer, the audience, who we do this for. Thank you to Binance for empowering the Crypto Corner newsletter. Please subscribe. Go to the newsletter section on Daily Maverick. And yeah, hopefully this was exciting for you. And yeah, tune in next time for a little bit more of a discussion around utility. And yeah, keep eyes peeled on Daily Maverick.